It's one of the most unsettling cold cases in modern history, because no matter how many experts examine it, the answer always feels just out of reach. In early 1959, 9 experienced Soviet hikers set off into the Ural Mountains, and they never came back. And more than 60 years later, despite reopened investigations, scientific modeling, and a mountain of speculation, one question remains. What really happened at Dyatlov Pass? The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorten, a remote peak in the Ural Mountains. On January 27, 1959, the hikers departed from the last inhabited settlement, Vizhai. The next day, one member, Yuri, turned back due to illness. That decision would end up saving his life. From that moment on, no one outside the group would ever see them alive again. The remaining 9 continued on skis. By January 31st, they'd reached the base of Kolets-Yakul, a name that, in the local Mansi language, means dead mountain. Instead of descending into the forest for shelter, they pitched their tent on the exposed slope, perhaps to practice for harsher conditions, or maybe because they lost daylight. When the group missed their expected return date of February 12th, families grew concerned. But it wasn't until February 26th that a search party discovered their tent. What they found was deeply unsettling. The tent was half collapsed and had been sliced open from the inside. All the hikers' boots, coats, and gear were still inside, as if they'd left in a panic. Footprints, some in socks, others entirely barefoot, led down the slope toward a distant tree line. In the deep snow, these prints simply ended. Following the discovery of the abandoned tent, searchers followed the tracks towards a nearby forest. About 500 meters downslope, beneath a large cedar tree, its branches mysteriously broken up to 5 meters high, they found the first 2 bodies. Georgy Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. Based on their positioning, it's believed they were moved after death. Both were wearing only their underwear, despite sub-zero temperatures. Nearby, signs of a small fire were found, suggesting they had tried to stay warm. Between February 27th and March 5th, the search party found 3 more hikers, Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin, who were found between the cedar tree and the tent, spaced apart as if they were trying to return to camp. But the search was far from over. It wasn't until May, more than 2 months later, that the remaining 4 hikers were discovered deeper in the woods. Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Semyon Zolotarov, and Nikolai Thibault-Brenon, buried beneath several feet of snow. Some of them were better dressed, wearing pieces of clothing believed to have been taken from the others, evidence that at least a few had survived longer into the night. Yet it was the nature of their injuries that raised eyebrows. While no external wounds were visible in some cases, internal injuries were described in reports as being comparable to a car crash. Even more perplexing were the traces of radiations found on 2 of the hikers' clothing, and some have described that either the hikers' skin, clothes, or snow within the area as having an orange tint, though no official explanation was ever given. For decades, the official cause of the Dyatlov group's deaths remained vague, simply labeled as a compelling natural force. But in July 2020, Russian prosecutors re-examined the case and concluded that an avalanche was the most likely explanation. Their findings suggested the group had cut into the slope to pitch their tent, unintentionally triggering unstable snow conditions above them. Then, in 2021, a study led by Swiss scientist Johann Gahm of EPFL and Alexander Puzerin of ETH Zurich offered a more detailed explanation. Not a full avalanche, but a delayed slab avalanche, a hard-packed sheet of snow that could have broken loose hours after the group set up camp. Their computer models showed that even a relatively small slab of snow could produce the kind of internal injuries found in some of the hikers, without leaving visible wounds. Under this scenario, the noise and force of the collapse could have panicked the group, prompting them to flee into the night with whatever they could grab. Some may have succumbed to hypothermia. Others may have fallen into the ravine while seeking shelter. But not everyone is convinced by the avalanche theory. In his 2013 book, Dead Mountain, author and researcher Donnie Eicher proposed a very different explanation, one that doesn't involve snow at all, but rather sound. Eicher believed the group may have been affected by infrasound, a type of low-frequency vibration that's too deep for humans to hear, but that can still affect the body and mind. Under certain wind conditions, a phenomenon known as a Kármán vortex street could have formed as air passed over the peak of the mountain. This could have generated intense infrasound waves, causing feelings of dread, nausea, and even panic. Disoriented and terrified, the hikers may have fled the tent without fully understanding why, possibly believing they were in danger when there was no visible threat. The theory is difficult to prove, but it offers a possible answer to one of the most puzzling questions. Why would experienced hikers suddenly abandon their shelter into a deadly snowstorm? Another theory looks beyond the environment and into the geopolitical shadows of the Cold War. In 1959, the Soviet Union was deep into weapons development, testing everything from long-range missiles to high-altitude parachute mines. Some researchers believe the Dyatlov group may have unknowingly wandered into a military test zone. Support for this theory comes from several strange details. First, the bodies of two hikers, Rustam Slobodin and Semyon Zolotarov, were found with elevated levels of radioactivity on their clothing. This was confirmed in the original Soviet investigation reports, but no explanation was ever provided. Second, witnesses from nearby villages, including locals in Ivdel and the Mansi community, reported seeing orange orbs, or glowing lights, in the sky on the nights around February 1st. These accounts were dismissed at the time, but they've remained part of the case's enduring mystery. If a weapons test went wrong, it might explain the hikers' panicked escape, their unusual injuries, and the state response. The area was quickly restricted, documents were classified, and even members of the original search team reported being pressured not to speak publicly. Now, regarding the traces of radiation found on some of the hikers' clothing, this could seem alarming, but there are plausible, non-exotic explanations backed by fact. First, at least one confirmed member, Yuri Krivonishenko, had previously worked around contaminated zones. Krivonishenko at the Mayak plant, which had suffered the Kishtim disaster in 1957, a major nuclear accident roughly 500 miles away. Second, examination of their gas lanterns suggests they used thorium mantles, which were standard at the time and are mildly radioactive. The presence of thorium dust could easily account for the elevated, but not dangerous, radioactivity detected on their clothing. While radiation was found, it's far more likely to be from everyday equipment and past exposure. But here's where it gets interesting. The hiker known to have previously worked near contaminated zones was not one of the two whose clothing showed high radiation levels. Not all theories stay within the realm of science. Among the more sensational claims is the idea that the Dyatlov hikers were attacked by a Yeti, or some kind of cryptid creature. This theory largely stems from a blurry photo taken by the group on one of the recovered rolls of film, which appears to show a tall, dark figure standing among the trees. While some interpret it as a person, or even one of the hikers, others have cited it as possible evidence of something more elusive. Then there's the UFO theory. The glowing orange orbs seen in the sky, described by multiple witnesses, have led some to suggest that the hikers encountered something extraterrestrial. Russian researcher Vadim Chernobrov, a known proponent of this idea, pointed to the presence of radiation and the condition of the bodies as signs of a possible close encounter, but no physical evidence has ever confirmed this. Still, the strange details, missing documents, contradictory reports, and classified materials have fueled speculation for decades, and in the absence of certainty, imagination often fills the void. One of the most haunting details of the Dyatlov Pass incident was how lightly clothed many of the hikers were, but there's a medical explanation for that, one that appears again and again in cases of fatal hypothermia. It's called paradoxical undressing. In the final stages of hypothermia, the body's temperature regulation fails. Victims sometimes experience an intense sensation of internal heat, prompting them to strip off their clothing, even in freezing conditions. Combined with disorientation, exhaustion, and panic, it could explain why some of the hikers fled their tent barefoot into a blizzard. So what really happened on that mountainside that binds all this together? The most widely accepted explanation, based on forensic reports and recent scientific modeling, is this probable sequence. A small slab avalanche, possibly triggered hours after the group cut into the slope, struck or surrounded the tent, causing them to fear and panic that more snow could follow. The hikers escaped and fled in haste. Some ran with inadequate clothing, others shed theirs due to hypothermic distress. In sub-zero temperatures and disorientation, they became separated. A few fell into ravines while seeking shelter, others succumbed to the elements. internal injuries came from snow pressure or falls. Radiation readings likely stem from previous exposure and lantern impurities, not secret military radiation. So what really happened on that mountainside in 1959? Scientific models do offer plausible answers, but contradictions remain, and yet the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass endures. The tent, torn from the inside with belongings left behind, tracks scattered across the snow ending nowhere, the radiation, the contradictions in the earliest reports. It's not a perfect puzzle. Some pieces fit, but others don't. And even with science offering its best explanations, something about that night, on that remote, frozen slope, refuses to be fully understood. Maybe that's why, more than 6 decades later, this case still fascinates us. Because between the silence of the forest and the weight of unanswered questions, lies a mystery that science alone can't quite melt away. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more, and as always, stay curious.